Coming up on the Sarc Fighter Podcast, Sarcoidosis and Covid-19.
Everybody talks about the elephant on your chest. Yeah, that's what I was feeling. It was just like...
Frank Rivera has long COVID, the kind that just won't go away.
So I woke up a flight of stairs and I had to stop halfway through.
Coming up, Frank talks about what it's like to have not just Sarc, but COVID-19. And not for weeks like most people, but for months.
This is the Sarc Fighter Podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Well, hello and welcome. This is episode 24 of the Sarc Fighter Podcast, brought to you in part by a grant from aTyr Pharma. The official Sarc Fighter song, called Zombie, is by Mark Steyer and the White Hot Lizards, his band. In Alberta, Canada, Mark is a fellow Sarc fighter, and you can hear his story about how Sarc took him off the ice as a hockey player in episode 12, and it sort of prompted him to write and find the lyrics and the message in this song. Proceeds from the song, by the way, are donated to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. I call this the Sarc Fighter Podcast because I'm fighting Sarc, and of course, so are you. You might be a patient, you might be a caregiver, a researcher, big pharmaceutical company. You've got some skin in the sarcoidosis game, and so we're all fighting Sarc together in one way or another. And this is a place where we can all gather and we can hear what's going on in the sarcoidosis community. And also because I know that a lot of sarcoidosis patients, myself included, have felt like you were alone at some point in time. You don't know anybody else who has Sarc. Sometimes you have doctors who have never heard of Sarc, or you're their only patient, or you're one of just a handful of patients, and you're trying to figure out what's going on and you know, how bad is this? How bad does your suffering compare to the next person's, and what's the outlook? What is the opportunity for you to control this illness, this disease, and get it where you want to be, where you can live some semblance of a normal life? And we talk about that a lot on here, on the podcast. And, you know, I'm fortunate right now because I have achieved sort of a happy point where it feels like my body is in remission, and I'm able to at least live a daily life. And actually, I'm going to talk about how life took a little turn for me here in a moment. But there is reason to hope. That at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. But as we deal with controlling this disease, we deal with the medications. Oftentimes, things like prednisone, methotrexate, that can make you feel not so great. And oftentimes, the medicine is worse than the disease itself. But we talk about that and we get it out there, and you can get a feel for, okay, is this just what happens when I have this? And that's the type of thing we talk about. Now, if you're new to sarcoidosis, I'm sorry that you are here, but hopefully you'll learn what's going on, and we try not to make it too dark and dreary. Some of the stories are, unfortunately, but I think we need to hear those. But if you're just trying to figure out what's going on with your body in the initial stages, Dr. Simon Hart in episode 2 is something that you'll want to listen to. It's Sarcoidosis 101. If you want to hear more about me, you can listen to my story in episode 1, find out how I got here. And then if you want to hear the backstory as to how the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research came into being, listen to episode 11 with the founders, Andrea and Redding Wilson. Andrea is a Sarc fighter, and she has had a struggle with Sarc. And she went looking for answers 20 years ago, and there wasn't any place to find answers. Very few doctors knew about it, and there was not a foundation, so they started one, and I work very closely with the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, and you might want to go ahead and listen to that episode 11, because I think it's a good one, and it kind of gives you some perspective on, even though it's stressful now, it was worse 20 years ago. Now, and I just do want to tell you that the Foundation not only helps researchers work on solutions for Sarc, and have raised millions of dollars toward that end, but they also specialize in reaching out to patients. And this podcast is one of the ways that we've sort of achieved a partnership to reach out. And they're also, working on new medications. They're helping patients with the search for doctors and all the changes in our lives. And so there's a great deal of patient outreach as well. Now, before I get to Frank and his story today, I have to bring you up to date on a couple of things, and this one is not Sarc related. I just have to vent. I was mountain biking last week, the day after Thanksgiving. It was a beautiful day here in Western Virginia, and bicycling is something that I can still do. I used to be a runner and a cyclist, and but because I have Sarc on my spinal cord, I don't have the coordination to run anymore. It's just too hard for me to put one foot in front of the other that fast. But because the pedals just sort of tell your legs where to go, and I still have strength and I still have energy, I am able to ride a bicycle, and I think I ride reasonably well. So I get out there, and I was riding on my mountain bike on the trails. And it was like I said, a gorgeous day. I was riding sort of easier to moderate trails at Carvin's Cove, which is a big mountain bike center here in Roanoke. And I was just about done. I had cleared a whole bunch of sort of difficult little, going over rocks and some logs and, small logs for me, and just riding the trail, really enjoying the woods. And something, I think either my pedal or my chain ring, hit something in the trail. I'm going to have to go back and look because I still don't know what it was. But the next thing I knew, I was over the handlebars, and I landed on top of a dead fallen tree with a bunch of old dead branches sticking up, and some of them were sharp because they'd been broken off. And took a huge gouge out of my leg right below the knee. And I was bleeding profusely, and I banged my hip, and I thought I'd broken my leg. It took me 3 or 4 minutes to be able to stand up and get out of this tangle. I'm laughing about it now, but at the time I wasn't sure, and I was by myself, which you're not supposed to do, but normally there's 3 or 4 or 5 people who might be able to go with me, but everybody had something else going on. My son Jonathan had a broken bicycle, and so nobody went with me, but I do this by myself quite often, and again, it's never been an issue, but this day it was. So at any rate, the bicycle was still in one piece, and it still rolled, and I was able to gingerly get my leg over the bike with all this blood coming down my leg. And it was essentially downhill from where I was back to the car, about a mile. And I had to pedal a little bit, and I was kind of amazed that I was able to pedal. Got to the car, drove myself to the emergency room. I came limping up, and the nurse is out front because it's COVID, right? And she looks at me and she's like, we'll take you right back. And, of course, emergency rooms are all full right now because of COVID patients. And they took me back and put me in a room, and 4 hours later I came out with a bunch of stitches, 13 on top, and then the gouge was so big they had to kind of sew my flesh together underneath with the kind of stitches that dissolve. So I'm limping around now, and I still don't know what happened. I have to go back to the scene of the crime and figure out what it was, because the trail looked wide open and it was a very easy trail, but there was a rock there or something that I didn't see. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I hope my tale of woe was at least interesting and worth your time. But at any rate, there's something else that has happened to me that is sarcoidosis related, and I'll bet that you can relate to this. Now, I take Humira, and since I've been on Humira, I have I have not had any flares. And the doctors had told me way back when that my body was rejecting Remicade, which had also been working. It was building up antibodies for Remicade, but Humira is a cousin, biological, but you're not supposed to get the antibodies to it. And so they started giving me that, and it started working. But of course, Humira is not considered a drug. that is in the menu to treat sarcoidosis. At least the doctors have it in their menu, but the insurance companies have not bought into that. And I think part of the reason is that Humira is expensive. So anyway, my prescription ran out. And then once that happens, you need to get, and you may or may not know this, I didn't, you need to get another pre-authorization. What's a pre-authorization? Well, it's something the insurance companies want to give you a renewal of their coverage of that prescription. So I get mine from CVS Specialty Pharmacy, and they just kept sending me emails. Your prescription has been rejected by your insurance company, but don't worry, you don't need to do anything at this time. We are reaching out to your doctor's office, to your insurance company, whatever. Well, I don't know who they were reaching out to, and they may have been doing it, but this was clearly an auto-generated email. It was not written by a person, and every time I received it, which was, I don't know, it was regularly. I couldn't tell you if it was 1 or 2 or 3 times a week. But in the meantime, I'm running out of Humira, and CVS keeps saying, don't worry, we're taking care of it. Don't worry, we're taking care of it. And the bottom line is that even if they thought they were taking care of it, it wasn't working. Whatever they were doing, if it was anything, wasn't working. So I contacted my doctor and said, this keeps getting rejected. And so they said, oh yeah, actually I contacted my insurance company, and they have someone who calls me every so often who says, I'm your insurance helper. I work with Aetna, and I can help you navigate any problems. So I called her, and she said, yeah, you're right. It has, the reason it's being rejected is that it has expired. So that was good. So then I contacted my doctor and said, well, we need to represcribe it. He said, okay, got it. So he represcribes it, and of course it was declined. And why I don't know why it would be declined, because I've been taking it and it's been working, and he sends in a new prescription, but this is the way the insurance companies work, and this is what I want you to know. So this apparently is typical. And I've talked to several doctors about this since, and they say, yeah, they want to get this an additional pre-authorization. So once it expires, you need to get another pre-authorization, which sounds odd to me because of the word pre. So and so the doctor goes ahead and he sends it in, and it's declined. So then he does an appeal, and it was approved. Upon appeal, meanwhile the clock is ticking and I'm running out of product, but it was approved, and they overnighted me, CVS overnighted me my prescription, and I received my medication on time on the day I need it. But I will tell you that I had stockpiled. Somehow I had gotten ahead by a couple of weeks, and had I not done that, I would have been taking no Humira for at least 2, maybe 3 weeks before before I got it. So I was able to keep myself covered in the meantime. But just know that at the end, whatever your prescription duration is, be watching for that. And if you're taking Humira, or it could be Remicade, that I had some difficulty initially getting Remicade because sarcoidosis is just a disease where there are some drugs like Humira that seem to work. Nobody knows exactly why, and there's not, it's a difficult argument for doctors when it's not one of, I mean, if you have lupus, I think it's lupus, or one of the drugs where, Humira is considered to be the main go-to, well, then it gets approved right away. But when you get into sarcoidosis, there's a bunch of drugs that seem to work, but they are not considered to be a sarcoidosis drug, and the insurance companies often reject it. And then even if you're on it, they want you to prove it again whenever it expires. And it is a lengthy process. I'm so happy that I have very helpful doctors and nurses, and they were on it, and they pushed it through for me at the Cleveland Clinic. Okay, that's my rant. Now, today is Frank Rivera. Frank, in my mind, may be the godfather of sarcoidosis outreach. He is a Sarc fighter. He has living up on Long Island. He was my first interview on the Sarc Fighter podcast. We met at an advocates meeting outside Washington, D.C. in early 2020 before the COVID outbreak. And so I got to know him, and my first interview with him was in person. But Frank is very active, but also very sick. He has Sarc all over his body. All over his body, inside, outside, you name it, and he's very sick, but he is so active. He's so proactive in trying to fight sarcoidosis. And so if you remember, we talked a bit on the podcast about COVID-19 risk and sarcoidosis with Dr. Robert Boffman at the University of Cincinnati, and his research initially is suggesting that there's no significant additional risk to the sarcoidosis population at large unless you live with somebody who has sarcoidosis. So you don't seem to catch it any easier, even though we're taking all these immune suppressant drugs. So that's good news. And he's doing a follow-up survey, and so far that's seeming to confirm that. So I want to put that out there. But Frank got COVID back in March, and it was a bad case. He'll be talking about that in the interview, and I'll let you tell him the scary details, but it was bad. All right. I mean, he was clinging to life at one point. It was that bad. But then he began recovering and seemed like he had kicked it, but it came back. And this does happen in a small number of COVID patients. And we've done some stories on the news with it, but it's called long COVID. And that's what Frank has. Like, he needed one more thing. So coming up, my interview with Frank Rivera.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter Podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Welcome back to the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Frank Rivera is joining me now on the podcast, and Frank has been on the podcast before. In fact, he was the first Sarc Fighter interviewed when we started the podcast in early 2020. And unfortunately, since last time, Frank, you have undergone a bout with COVID-19. First of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
And
Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. And second of all, I am so sorry that you were one of those among our population that had COVID, and you continue to have it. What's going on?
Yeah, I got COVID early in March. Actually, it was diagnosed in March 17th, but I knew I had it earlier than that. It just took a long time for the test results to come back because it was so early in the process. And New York, of course, was getting hit really, really bad in March, the beginning of March and all the way through April. So yeah, for me, I just thought it was a regular cold or regular sarcoidosis things going on, because a lot of them were mirrored the same thing until I got a fever. And because I don't get fevers, my temperature runs low. It's 96 something where it usually runs. And when I started, even a 99 fever was a lot for me. So, and I could tell between the fever and the fatigue that it wasn't just that. So I ended up going to the doctors, and then they shooed me out of the doctor's office.
No kidding.
Go get tests. Go get a test. And here's an interesting fact: is my first test that I got came back inconclusive.
Really?
Yeah. My doctor was like, I never heard of that, and actually called the Department of Health to find out what that meant. And they were like, what what it meant was the person who did the swab didn't go deep enough for it to get what it needed. So that's why it came back inconclusive.
But at that point, people really weren't. I mean, there were no cases in the United States, or very few, so people weren't really looking for COVID.
Yeah, it was. I mean, really in the beginning. I think like just in New York alone. I mean, I know New York got hit early, but it was still very, very, very low, and like the doctor, like I said, the doctors didn't even know what to do. They were like, you may have COVID, get out of here.
Holy cow. Well, of course, you know, what do? You're doing bed rest and hope for the best, but not, and I want to let listeners know that we're going to talk about everything that it did to you, and then how it sort of slowly triggered some things in your body. But one of the things I want to put right out there, if people haven't listened to episode 1, they should go back and listen to that, because your story is amazing. But you now have sarcoidosis in every organ in your body. I don't know how you're walking around, and you are one of the loudest voices in the fight against sarcoidosis. You've been extremely effective with all of your activities and some of the things that you host. And again, I want to get to all of that. But let's take this through. So you got sick. How sick were you when you realized that you had COVID and you're going through the symptoms that we're now talking about on the news every day?
In the beginning, first, my lungs is the first thing that I had sarcoidosis in, but for the last 5 years, my lungs were actually the best out of all the places that I had sarcoidosis, until all of a sudden I started to feel like, I mean, everybody talks about the elephant on your chest. Yeah, that's what I was feeling. It was just like, so I walk up a flight of stairs and I had to stop halfway through. And that's not me. I'm able to usually, at least, you know, my pulmonary function tests, I mean, everything was 95 or better. Even my oxygen level was not, I don't think it ever got lower than 95, other than being in the hospital way back when. So yeah, I just I know something's going on, and I because of being with sarcoidosis, we already are quarantining for most of our time. We're always worried about, you know, what we could catch, and so I was quarantining. So it kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, where did I get this from? I have no clue. And tracing back in March was pretty much non-existent.
Of course.
So it's really hard to figure it out. So I don't know where I got it, but I do know that all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I was, like I said, the headaches were really bad, and I have migraines, but these things were like, I don't want to see the light. I don't want to, I just basically, for the first 2 weeks, I was just in my room by myself. Unfortunately, my wife had to go sleep in another room of the house, and I was really quarantining even before I actually got the the diagnosis of.
Yeah. Did she get it? Did Diana get it?
No, Diana didn't get it. My daughter didn't get it.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really lucky.
Holy cow. So the elephant on your chest, you can't walk up and down the stairs, you're quarantining. You had the fever.
Yes.
Had the fever.
And the fever wouldn't cut down either at all.
Were you scared?
Oh yeah, because I mean, when you hear that, you know, pre-existing conditions, if they get they get COVID, they're probably gonna die. And I won't lie, at some points of the time, not saying I want to kill myself, but I wanted to die. It was bad. It felt worse than even my worst Sarc flare-up. It was because it was just so heavy. It was like sarcoidosis just magnified. Because I was like, the fatigue I was getting, like I said, I couldn't get out of bed. And then like the breathing, I ended up on an oxygen machine. It was just, I was using a nebulizer. at one point, I was actually called up the doctor and said, I think I need to go to the hospital. And that was my pulmonologist. And he called the sarcoidosis specialist. And they both made a decision. They said to me that if I go to the hospital, I'll die.
Really?
Yeah, that was it. Because by the time I thought about going to the hospital, there's two hospitals that are next to me. One is Stony Brook University, which is one of the largest hospitals on Long Island. And then there's another one, a private one called Mather Hospital. And Mather Hospital literally had one bed left. And then Stony Brook actually made an outside unit. So my doctors were like, "You're basically you're walking into a petri dish."
Right, because there's so many other sick people.
Yeah. And with sarcoidosis, you don't want to be around sick people, even if they don't have COVID. They could have something else that could get you sick. And at that point, that's when they really were using the ventilators a lot. Let's put everybody on a ventilator, put everybody on the ventilator. And both my doctors said my lungs probably would not have made it to a ventilator. So they made a different decision to actually keep me home.
So you stayed home, you kind of suffered through the worst of the symptoms and slowly began to improve. So maybe the doctors, made the best decision there. How did you know that you were feeling quote unquote well again?
Well, the first things were the headaches started going away. And that was like, thank you, because the headache, I mean, having sarcoidosis, if you're in a flare-up, when you can't breathe, you've been through it before.
Yeah.
And same thing with like fatigue. We've been through it before. But the headaches were just so, amazingly bad. So that would first start going away. And then my breathing started to catch up a little bit better. One thing I did want to say is there was 2 nights where my wife actually had to sit in the room, even though I had COVID. She still sat in the room to watch to make sure I was breathing through the night. That's how bad it was at one point. Really? So I just, thank you to my wife. That's a big sacrifice, knowing she could have got it herself. Yeah. So then my breathing started. The fatigue was still there. It lasted a little longer than everything else, but I also got, and this was before they knew about the skin rash. I had skin rashes all over my arms, both my arms, my chest, and my back was like filled with rashes, and so that slowly went away. So then, like I said, it was early March, and then by early to mid-May is when I really started to feel better. Yeah. And that was a good month before.
Now, but what we are starting to see some reporting on now, in fact, as you and I were leading up to this, is they have discovered that a lot of people have something in their body that's dormant that is triggered by a virus, and it might be any virus, but unfortunately the COVID virus is one of them. Mm-hmm. And in your case, that triggered something called long COVID.
Yes.
So you started feeling better, and then you started feeling worse, and you still don't feel great. So
yes.
So are we agreed that you're one of those people that had that trigger?
Yes, that's the first thing one of the doctors said to me, is that there's something in your body that got triggered, and now that it's like the best way to describe it really is I have 5 as they call it, confirmed diagnosis diseases. Okay, and as of right now, I actually got a new paper of my diseases. I have a total of 16. So I got 11 new ones from COVID. And well, the thing is like my sarcoidosis doctor wants to say it's all because of COVID, but then he's looking and he's like, well, could it be could it be COVID/sarcoid, or sarcoid trying to fight off what the COVID is bringing to my body? Because that's what's, it's a very vicious circle. Because sarcoid really, it's really overactive cells, and that are going to fight off a cold or whatever. And well, when your whole body has a cold, so it's kind of like this vicious circle. But it is so hard to deal with, because they don't know how to treat it. I mean, there's no, like, at least with sarcoid, we have, even though we don't have a cure drug, we have drugs that help us live as normal as we can.
Right.
They don't have that for COVID. There's nothing, they weren't ready for something like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully the vaccine will come out soon. So,
yes.
So this long COVID, because I've seen some of your posts on Facebook and, follow some of what you got going on, but you were in pretty bad shape after this came back. So did it come back with those same type of symptoms that you had initially?
Yeah, but then it actually affected specific parts of, like, first of all, I didn't have sarcoid in my liver or kidneys, and now I do. And then it started attacking my heart even more than it was. Like before, I have a loop monitor to check my heart and everything, but now I have high tachycardia now, pretty high. I mean, the lowest my resting heart rate is 90 now, and that's just resting.
Really?
It got up to 200 at one point. My bottom, it was, my blood pressure was at one point 170 over 200. So,
holy cow! Wow.
Yeah, and
and that's ongoing, right? Because of the
and like even right now, like I still spike up. Just last week it was 150 over. It was like 163, I think it was 160 something.
Wow.
So it's still ongoing. It flip flops. It goes back and forth, and it really does play a part on your mental health too, because you don't know, like I've always been, and I think I even said it in the first one, is if I know what's going on, I'm okay with it. Yeah, it is a disease. I understand that, but at least I know what it is, and I know how we're going to fight it. But with this, there is nothing to fight it. I mean, basically they're trying to fight it like with just regular drugs, and they're not working like it would for a normal person. So I've been on and off all these different types of drugs. I mean, hard drugs. It really affected my. I have IBS as one of my main other diseases that I've had for a while, but it really messed that up.
Irritable bowel.
Irritable bowel syndrome. Yeah, it's really messed that up a lot. Where to the point where either I don't want to eat, or when I do eat, it goes right through me, and I'm not getting the nutrients in my system. And it's like, I mean, I look at this thing, and it's like, I had a TIA just 2 months ago, and I never had before. I got nerve palsy that I've never had before, and cataracts are now coming in, so it's affected my eyes a lot more than it has before. Like my eyeglasses, I mean, I went and tried to get a new set, and even they don't help me at all.
Wow.
It's really, so it's kind of different. That's the thing. It's so different than just sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis was like, all right, you get pain, you have it in arthritis, you get the pains there. Well, This is like all over the place.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, it makes it tough.
So do you, are you guys wearing masks in the house, or do you ever get to leave the house, or what is your status?
I've gone out just a couple of times, not many, just for sanity's sake. And a lot of it is just car drives. Even it's still not like going out. It's car drives. I did once to go see my daughter sing, because they were allowed back, and that's something that she really loves to do. And being a father, it's just something that I'm proud of her, and I wanted to see her do it because she's getting, she's 17, so she's gonna age out of the School of Rock next year. So it's like something I wanted to do, but I stayed away from everybody. It's like the person way in the back.
Right. Right.
But as long as I got to hear it,
Yeah.
yeah, I wear masks almost all the time. My family, as soon as my wife actually took 3 months off of work during when I was diagnosed with COVID. She actually took off 3 months. She had the time saved, so she used it all up for that. But then when she went back to work, now as soon as she comes in, she has a change of clothes and the bathroom, and she goes right into the bathroom and takes a shower. And my daughter does the same thing. She goes to school she's doing the distance learning, so she's not even going to school just because of me.
But when they come in,
changed her life.
So they're doing everything they can to keep you in a virus-free environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though you've got the antibodies already in your body, one would think that you would be okay. I wonder if it's the virus being active or if the virus has come and gone, but it triggered all these things, and those things are what's causing your dismay now.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, who am I to say? I'm just wondering how things work because I've read some articles.
That's what we and it's funny, as much as like you talk about that, even my doctors are saying the same thing. How am I supposed to know? We've never had this before. There's no book on this.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of the same things. A little bit more educated guesses on how it will react to my other medicines is really what my other problem diagnosis is. That's
you're taking right now. You're taking Humira and what else?
Yes. I'm taking Humira. I'm taking Bistolic for my heart. I'm taking amitriptyline for my headaches, and I'm actually just started the Botox for my for migraines. The problem with that is like you get it once every 3 months, but it takes three times. You have to do 3 times to do it for it to actually fully work. So it takes 9 months before it actually works. So that's why I'm still on. Hopefully, I'll be off the amitriptyline once the Botox does kick in. I'm back on prednisone again. I was off for it for a while, but it's a low dose. But really, the big things is like the inhalers. I'm on albuterol, and I'm also on Symbicort, and those things are steadies for me. And then the Humira, like I said earlier, is really, I've only used 4. Yeah, it's my 4th one, and I can definitely feel the difference with the Humira. So that it like I was saying about having trouble breathing going up a flight of stairs. It hurts so much to even go up the flight of stairs, as well as not being able to breathe. So that's now at least leveled off a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm taking one for high cholesterol, Crestor, and because my cholesterol just jumped up out of nowhere.
I tell you, so I mean, you're taking all of these drugs. I feel sorry for myself because when I get up in the morning, I've got all my drugs lined up that I take, and evening the same thing, and I think, man, I used to be such a healthy person, and now I'm taking all these drugs, but my menu is about 1/10 of your menu. I feel so bad for you.
Well, you kind of get used to taking them. It's just a matter of, well, for me, like I also have Parkinson's, and
Uh,
I've had that before this, and it's actually incited I used to have it mostly on my left side, but now my right side is starting to kick in. And my Parkinson's doctor doesn't know why, other than something must have excited it. But because my right side, it wasn't like I never shake, but it was very, very rarely. And it's now they both have the same kind of tremors, and so it's starting to take a little bit over on the right side too. So it's kind of it's everything's got put up to the umph degree now.
right, right. Well, so what is your day like? Do you sleep in? Can you get enough rest? Do you have the fatigue, or are you really getting a lot of binge watching in with Netflix? I mean, how?
Yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah.
My sleep patterns are way, way off. I was just saying this to my doctor 2 days ago. Is one day I'll sleep an hour for the whole day, and then the next day I'll sleep, or not even, or 2 days later I'll sleep all day and just crash. It's not anywhere in between. My anxiety has been very high because of not knowing what's going on. But then it's almost like, it's really weird. I don't want to call myself bipolar, but it almost is like that, because I get really, really high. When I'm highs, my anxiety is very high, but then I get really low depression, where I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get out of bed. I'm actually going to see a psychiatrist on Saturday to see if we can try to get that at a level where I'm not, because my sleeping average, I have a counselor, and I talk to her every week, and I have to write I have my own book of like how long I slept. And for the last 2 months, I've averaged maybe like 4 hours sleep a day, maybe.
Well, that's when your body repairs itself. You've got to get that sleep.
Exactly. My mind starts going, and then it's like, all right, try yoga, try, meditating, and I try it, and some reason my mind just goes, and it's just like, all right, what am I gonna do? What do I have to do tomorrow? It just starts going like crazy, like a mile a minute.
Yeah. So you're seeing, because I would imagine a lot of listeners are trying to figure out whether they have long COVID or they are dealing with just the effects of sarcoidosis, which is what we usually talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get more into the mental health aspect of coping with this disease.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly had trouble. So you see a counselor, and is that because of long COVID, or is that just something that you have ongoing because of Sarc?
This counselor, I've ever since I was diagnosed in 2011, I've been seeing her, and to deal with that part of the sarcoidosis aspect of it. But then when COVID came, A, I couldn't see her. Everything was a phone call. And B, she even said, like, I'd be talking to her, and I'd be talking to her a mile a minute, and she's like, take a deep breath, stop. And she's like, wow, you were so, wound up. And I was, and then all of a sudden she'll be talking to me, and it'll be like 2 minutes later, I'm just like catching my breath, because she could actually hear me breathing heavy. And she's like, are you okay? Do we need to call a doctor? I'm like, no, it just all of a sudden hit me. And she's like, and she's a great counselor. I mean, she's helped me so much. Like I've said on the first one, 2015, I thought about committing suicide. She's the one who talked me out of it, and told me to go check in for a 72 hours watch, which is, go to the hospital and they watch it for 72 hours. And she's always around. Like my counselor, like I said, I could call her anytime. And as long as she doesn't have a patient, she'll answer and talk to me. And she knows now, because of what's going on, of how high and lows I get. it's kind of scary. So she answers as much as possible. But then, like I said, she just said that I should go see a psychiatrist. So hopefully, she's like, I know you don't want to be on any more medicines you're already on, but you don't want to live like this. And it's true. It's almost exhausting to be like, because you're so high up and you're so anxious, and then so low, your body just doesn't know where it is anymore.
Right. Well, and now, despite where you are and how you feel, you continue to host and moderate and put out programs to help other patients. And I'm so impressed that you continue to do that despite how you feel. So can you talk a little bit about what you do regularly and then some of the special events that you have that you're working on?
Yeah, regularly, since I'm home, I'm doing, it's actually, I think it's helped me out staying home because, I'm not running around having to meet this person. Zoom has been, as they say, has been a godsend. I've been I still deal with an organization called RDLA. What they do is they help rare disease legislation. And then they try to get things passed. So I work with them. But the good thing is, like, even though I work with other groups, I'm very, very upfront about it, is that I may feel good today, but I don't know how I'm going to feel tomorrow. So, you kind of bear with me. And most of them know that because they are dealing with other rare diseases that do the same kind of thing. But I've been really working with another organization called WeGo Health. And WeGo Health is they are not just for rare diseases. They help every kind of diseases. Goes from, they have HIV, has bulimia, they have, MS. It doesn't matter. Parkinson's, they have people from Parkinson's. They have, but then they also have mental health people that talk about mental health and how it affected them, and they call patient leaders. And it's been really good to work with them because you really get to collaborate with a lot of them, and we've worked on different items, and each one of us, like, especially like for me, it is like working with, I call it big box, like, MS, right? When right. They have or even Parkinson's, they have the big groups, and you learn a lot.
Those are not orphan diseases.
Yeah, exactly.
Like sarcoidosis over there in the corner, right?
Yeah. I got to learn a lot from them. Actually, I went to one of their webinars, and they were talking about my first webinar I was just about to do. It was actually like that week. They were talking about social justice with everything going on in United States, and how it's affecting people. I run a sarcoidosis virtual support group, and that's a national. Actually, I've actually had people from all over, but it's open to everybody. And as you could see, when the social justice started to happen, when everything started to happen, our numbers started to drop. And I was wondering what was going on. So I started calling people to find out, why aren't you coming to the meetings anymore? And there was some people like, I'm afraid to say anything, whether, to offend somebody else. And then some of them are so mad because of what's going on, and they didn't want to, ruin the meetings. I'm like, well, a meeting is supposed to be about your feelings and helping, and everybody supporting it. So that in August, I made this one this is the very first time I did a forum. I actually did a social justice forum, and this was just for sarcoidosis patients because, as you know, a majority of sarcoidosis patients are African American women,
right?
And then African American men, of course, are a high risk also.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't make the social justice forum just for African Americans. I made it for everyone. I wanted everybody, like the panel. I had psychiatrists. I had doctors, sarcoidosis doctors. I had government officials. I wanted everybody. I had a pastor, actually two, and I wanted everybody to be able to talk about it. And like some people said to me, "Oh, you just do catering to African Americans." I'm like, no. I'm like, you need to hear this just as much as they need to hear what's going on. We're never going to be a country until we all listen to each other. And
that's true.
So,
I believe that.
Yeah, and so it went over really well. We had people that showed up to the Zoom meeting alone was 93 people, and then we also streamed it to Facebook Live, and that had over 83 people there. So I mean, it was nice.
Yeah.
So now, since of my health, I'm only doing, I'm not doing as much as I used to. I know my limitations, and I always kid around, but it's sort of kidding around. My wife will kill me if I keep on at the same pace that I was on.
Right. Well, of course, and if you're only getting 4 hours sleep and you can't turn your mind off and you're worried about all the logistics for putting together these programs, your wife might be right, Frank.
Yeah, she definitely is right. And I understand it. But it's one thing, I mean, we had a compromise, because one thing for me is I tried to stop altogether, stop doing any kind of advocating for a little while. And I found I was just sitting there and thinking about, and thinking, and nothing to get my mind off of it, per se.
Yep.
So I was like, all right. So I kind of worked with my wife. I work on one project at a time, and that's it.
Right. Do you have I'm pretty sure that you do have a website where I can put links in the show notes where people can find out about, in other words, if they want to join the Sarcoidosis virtual support group, or if you have a special event coming up of some kind, that's all on your website. What is that?
Yeah, actually, we started a new nonprofit organization. It's myself, it's Kerry Wong, Kathleen Toronto, and Cheryl Bradford. It's called Stronger Than Sarcoidosis.
Okay, I've seen that, yes.
Yeah, the reason we did that is because I had sarcoidosis of Long Island, but people will look over it if they're not from Long Island, because so I wanted them to be anybody to call me at any time. So we started this for patients, to help patients. And part of it is this education program that I've been working on with these forums. And it's StrongerThanSarcoidosis.org.
Okay.
And the event page there is always updated. And it talks about like how they can register for like my new forum that we're having. We're actually having a chronic pain. We widened it out to chronic pain and mental health.
And that I think that will have already happened by the time this podcast goes live. So I don't want to direct people to it, but will there be a way they can look at that?
We are recording it. We will have it recorded. It'll be on our website, and it'll also be on our YouTube page, also Stronger Than Sarcoidosis YouTube page.
Okay, and that's Catherine. That's Kerry Wong, who's been on the podcast, and Cheryl Bradford, who's been on the podcast. Yeah,
and Kathleen Toronto. She's my vice president from Sarcoidosis of Long Island, and she wasn't at our ambassador meeting last time. But she's been an ambassador for 4 years. It just that she wasn't able to make it that time. But she's been working with me for 6 years on my Sarcoidosis of Long Island. And so and the reason we made it is not to we're not going against the National Organization Foundation for Sarcoidosis. Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. We're not going against them. We're actually trying to help them alleviate some of the calls that they do get. They get, a lot of times they get calls from patients, and by the time they reach out to one of us, there's that it's a delay of like a week or two before that original patient called FSR. So now, what we're trying to do is kind of, if they call, we have 4 people here that, already deal with sarcoidosis and know what sarcoidosis is all about. And we could help them a lot easier, especially with the little things like finding them a doctor, or even just talking about a medicine, and we always tell everybody we're not doctors,
Right.
but this is how this medicine reacted with us. And I could tell you how it reacted to others, because I've talked to so many of people that have, used almost every medicine that we use. So they get that little bit of a quicker response. And it helps FSR. FSR, they do great things. They do great things with research. They still, do have a great patient, program. It's just something just kind of help them out a little bit. And so, that's what we're keeping it for. It's not, we're not going against anybody. We don't want it. I definitely don't want anybody to think we are.
Right. Yeah. Well, FSR is doing some great stuff, and
yes,
and the last thing we want to do is splinter the sarcoidosis world. And so, I mean, they need every ounce of support they can get, so they can continue to do their good work. And the ambassador program is fellow Sarc fighters, Sarc warriors that other people can call to get guidance. And that I know everybody that you mentioned has been an ambassador.
Yes.
I guess the new word is advocate. And I'm one also, but I'm not one of the people that is on the list for folks to call, because my job is to do this podcast and to sort of get the word out there for everybody else. So that's sort of my role in the whole thing. And I'm really happy to do that. But you're like the nucleus of this whole thing. So
Thank you.
People should know that. You really do work hard, and you've been very effective in getting the word out. How often are you doing the support group now?
The support group we do twice a month, especially during these times. Actually, we went up when it was really bad, when everybody was pretty much on, they didn't call it lockdown, but, stay home. When everybody was on stay home, we went up to 3 times a month, and we were still getting 30 people each time. We still, I'd say we average right around 25 right now. But we actually just had one yesterday. But yeah, so it's going well, and we're seeing new people, which is nice. It's not we have a core people that come every time, but then almost every meeting we'll have at least 1 or 2 new people. And that's something that I was striving for in the beginning, is at least each time we have one, get somebody new in and let them know they're not alone. That, I've always said my favorite saying, you are not alone. And I just want to make sure that, and it's a place where they can talk and they can say whatever they want. It's only first names. So we don't, and if you want to call in and you don't want to be on video, you can call in too. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So everybody can talk, and it gives it, like I said, it just gives a platform for everybody on stuff they don't understand, which, with sarcoidosis can be a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it is. And so all the information will be at strongerthansarcoidosis.org.
Yes, definitely. All that's on there. All our events and everything is also on there.
All right. So as we begin to wrap up, we talked about your journey through having COVID and then long COVID. Where are you now, and what is your prognosis going forward?
Where am I now? Right now, when it comes to, I'm in more pain than I have been in a long time. And like I said, the emotional stuff has been a little hard just to get used to. But right now, I say I'm a lot better than I was when I first got the post-COVID, in the respects of I'm starting to understand it a little bit more. Before, I didn't understand it, which made it really hard. And I also now have built boundaries. It's okay to say no at times, you know. I was never really one who would say no. I would always try to help everybody else out. And you know, you can't help everybody else if you're in bed sick. So I've decided, like I said, I do one project at a time. We actually, you know, this mental health project that is going to happen, we're actually going to be doing it quarterly now. And it looks like we're going to have a sponsor. I'm not going to say yet because it's not signed yet. Okay. But they seemed very interested. They actually gave us a link that we can use for sarcoidosis patients and chronic pain patients, that they can get 20% off. It's a onlinetherapy.com. Mm-hmm. And what they did is they gave me a link where people can sign in on this link, and they can get 20% off of their copay or so that's, you know, it always helps. And they speak, you know, they get to speak online to a counselor, licensed counselor, and we're going to continue to work with them. And the more people that we get to sign up, the more of a discount, they said. And so we're working on that at this point. Okay. You know, so it's nice to have that partner, especially with mental health. It's so hard to get, it's so hard to get mental health. I mean, I could just tell you that trying to find a psychiatrist, the first 4 people that I called didn't have anything open for 4 months. I'm like, right. How is that going to help me?
Everybody's going nuts just from COVID all by itself.
Exactly.
They're stir crazy from being cooped up at home. And we're doing stories on the news every night about how the mental health aspects are terrible. And on a sad note, a friend of mine committed suicide. And he was a pillar in the community and a gifted athlete and businessman, and he, you know, and his wife just came right out and said, look, it was being cooped up with COVID. He was a people person, and when you took the people away from him, he was a swim coach, and he couldn't do all that anymore. It literally it killed him. So I'm not surprised then that you're having a hard time finding a counselor, because everybody's booked.
And I was lucky to find one, but then, you know, it's kind of not funny, but it's kind of weird that what happens to me is usually what makes me go and do my next thing. I see if it's happening to me, it must be happening to other people. So hence why the mental health project we're doing now, we're going to have 4 therapists on the panel just to talk, and that's going to be a regular now. Like the people that are the patient panelists will probably change each time, because I'd like to get a well-rounded opinion from all different types of patients. Actually, one of the patients that is doing this, her name is Deanna Nagel. She's actually a sarcoidosis patient.
Really?
I've never met her, and she's also a psychotherapist.
Really?
Yeah. So it'd be nice to see, you know, have her on a panel, and it's just nice to see, you know, I want everybody to. It goes back to you're not alone. I want everybody to know that they can talk about it, and one of the big things is I'm trying to get men involved, because men are the hardest ones to go see who want to go see a counselor. You know, we were always told when we were growing up, you know, you're the man of the house, or you're the big one, or you know, you can't show emotion. And you know, I go back to 2.5 years ago. I knew 18 sarcoidosis patients who committed suicide. And out of those 18, 13 of them were men. And yeah, so
Really?
So that tells me that men aren't following through or going to see someone to talk to, and we can't have that.
Well, men are traditionally not good at sharing their feelings.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's.
But all our counselors that we have on are men. So I thought I did that kind of on purpose to, you could talk to this guy, I mean, and if you talk to them, they're really like down to earth, like talking, like, everything about sports we were talking about and all this other stuff. So it kind of makes everybody feel comfortable, I would think. So that's what I'm hoping. That's my goal.
Right. All right, Frank. Well, I'll put all the links to what you're doing in the show notes, but the most important thing is thank you for coming on, sharing your story, and we hope that you can continue to improve from long COVID.
Yeah, it's a step. It's what they call a hurdle, but I've had many of them before, so I'll just take it as it comes. With smiling and laughing.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for being on the Sarc Fighter Podcast.
Thank you very much.
So many, many thanks to Frank for joining me on the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Takeaways from this interview. First of all, Frank needs to get some sleep. He's trying to recover, and when you're sleeping, that's when your body fixes itself. And he told us he's getting 4 hours of sleep, and his brain is so active that he just can't sleep. Frank, I hope you get some sleep. Also, folks, be careful with your exposure to COVID-19. It looks like we're at no additional risk, but if you're like Frank, you just don't want to go down that road. It appears that some people have a dormant condition not related to sarcoidosis that can be triggered by this virus. And I say not related. It may or may not be sarcoidosis related. Who am I to say? And doctors just don't know enough about it yet, but you don't want to be the person that finds out the hard way, right? The last thing most of us need is to be taking another medication. And Frank continues, by the way, to host these virtual support groups, and I'll have a link in the show notes. He and 3 other people have formed the StrongerThanSarcoidosis.org, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes, and that's a place that you can go to reach out and find some help and some support. And then the last thing I'll tell you is that I've been listening to a lot of advice about podcasting, and one of the things that you need to do if you're on the microphone is to ask people to say, if you like this, tell one other person. If you would just tell one other person about the Sarc Fighter Podcast and get them to tune in and listen and subscribe, that would be super helpful, and it helps me spread the word, and it helps me help more people. So please, by the way, send me an email. It's in the show notes, and I'd love to hear from you, whatever it is you like or don't like about the podcast. Maybe you want to be a guest. Maybe you want to tell me about somebody that you think should come on the show. I'm always anxious to hear feedback from the listeners. And please follow the Sarc Fighter on Instagram and on Facebook. And then again, I just want to say thanks to Frank for joining me here today. And Frank, it's okay to slow down a little bit. I hope you kick this thing as soon as possible. Until next time, people, keep fighting.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.